This episode is an interview with Samir Ibrahim. Samir is the education advisor for the International Institute of Building Enclosure Consultants. Prior to that, he served as the Director of Design Services for Carlisle Construction Materials for over 40 years. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Architectural Engineering from the University of Alexandria in Egypt. He's a member of the EPDM Roofing Association, the American Architectural Foundation, American Institute of Architects, the International Institute of Building Enclosure Consultants, and the National Roofing Contractors Association. He was named to the RCI, which is now IIBEC, Jury of Fellows in 2016. He's authored and co-authored papers on sustainability, resiliency, roof color, impact on energy use in many locations, many outlets, including the Huffington Post. This was a really wonderful discussion. I thoroughly enjoyed it personally. Chelsea and I talked with Samir about a variety of topics, including the construction of a U.S. embassy in Moscow in the early 80s, why gray areas are the most interesting parts of problem solving, what sustainability means to Samir, which happens to align quite closely with what it means to me, how durability plays a role in sustainability, and a whole variety of other topics. It was a wide-ranging, very interesting conversation that I thoroughly enjoyed, and I hope that you will too. Now, please enjoy this conversation with Samir Ibrahim.
So Matt, I actually got the chance to work in the office with Samir a number of years ago, and he's one of the first people in the industry that I would say I would consider a mentor. And he actually was a mentor to some of the people that I worked really closely with back when I was at Carlisle Construction. And Samir, you're smiling when I can say that Janelle was a close friend and still a close friend, but mentor of mine. And he was an original mentor to her. So just so many people he has impacted. And he's just one of those people that stays in your heart no matter where you're working. So it's really cool to have him here today.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you.
That's fantastic.
I spent 42 years in Carlisle, and I was mostly roofing, obviously. And as Carlisle grew, I get involved in low-grade waterproofing, negative waterproofing, tunnel waterproofing, walls, total building envelope encapsulation, pond lining. Back in old days, I got involved in waterproofing of railroad bridges. And I took on some of the most complex projects, unusually shaped type buildings and things like that. So to me, it was my work was a hobby. So I really enjoyed it. And when people had issues like a challenge or a problem, if you want to call it a problem, I loved that. I always focused on gray areas. I could not deal with just black and white things. I don't think I would have lasted 42 years at Carlisle, but my previous job. So, and I spent that much, well, all of the time in the design. You know, it's all been in the design. Back when the business was very small, and my goodness, I remember we did like small number, a few hundred projects a year, to now we're doing, well, I'm not part of it now anyway, but the number is well over 30-some thousand or even more than that, projects. So that's a tremendous growth. Absolutely. And not just the volume, but also the variety of applications and things of that nature. So
you mentioned the gray areas was what kept your attention the most. I want to poke at that a little bit. What is it about the gray areas that made it interesting for you and more interesting than the black and white?
Well, I always loved math and geometry, and I loved it to find like a puzzle. I always liked the puzzle, and I like to solve the puzzle. And I was always taught, when you are given a situation or a problem, read it and read it carefully, because you can begin following some of the signs as, depend how it's written and how it's described. Will be your key points to follow. And I learned to ask so many questions it's just very, very intriguing, to me. My background has been in architecture engineering. As a child, I was raised by my grandfather. I was raised in Alexandria, Egypt. It's a beautiful city on the Mediterranean, great architecture, and lots of history. And he was a general contractor. He used to take me when I was 6 years old to some of his projects, and I became fascinated with architecture. So I went to engineering school, actually, where I studied architecture. And basically, the degree you get is architecture engineering, because they get you involved in, sanitary engineering, structural engineering, acoustical treatment of buildings. Is not just when you go to a fine art and you get, like an art degree. So I got very heavily involved in construction of a building itself. I become so motivated when I take something and I'm able to solve it. To me, that, So I loved that, and I enjoyed working with the team. People that have issues and like to diagnose the problem and come up with a solution. So it's fascinating. I don't know if I'm answering your question or not. It's a combination of many things.
You have a
that drove
fascinating
me.
story. Yeah, I love hearing
Yeah.
about the background starting way back
Yeah.
in Alexandria. That's very cool.
Yeah, one of my early projects, I was a young designer at the time, was the U.S. Embassy complex in Moscow, in the Soviet Union back then. Was, I believe, 1982. And this was not just one building, there were multiple buildings, from the embassy building, a school, 4 multi-level residential office building, and they were constructed in a site where the center area, 3 floors in the ground, you have a bowling alley, basketball court, grocery store, and name it. So if you lived in the complex, you don't have to come above ground. To simplify that, they also had miniature tunnels or a miniature subway, and they had these tunnels going around the complex with stops, at the embassy, at the schools, at the residential. So that was one of the most challenging in my younger years, was to take on a project like that. I had to do the waterproofing, the roofing, and the plaza waterproofing, the planter waterproofing. Was just very, very fascinating, and experience that working on one project, it gave me a lifetime experience working on it.
What were some of, so that's 1982 is not quite before my time, but like exactly at my time. I was born in 1982. So I'm curious to know what are some of the, big picture differences between where we're at today in 2024 and how a project like that might go today if you had that same project handed to you today.
Yeah.
What do you see? What has changed and evolved in that time?
Well, keeping in mind, I was part of a company and we had certain products to work with. So I had to be innovative, and what of our products can be utilized in the different areas, like where I can use EPDM versus where I can use butyl membrane, which typically we use below grade in application. We also have a liquid applied type material that you use for certain detail work. There were, so you had to do, like if I do it again today, I will have to actually enhance the design, enhance the application, because there are more products available. There are higher quality drainage board today, and when you deal with waterproofing, drainage, and managing the moisture in the soil is the most important. Versus back then was basically dealing with protection board, because you are trying to protect the membrane against physical damage.
Interesting.
So that's one thing I will definitely do differently. The other issue was the planters. There have been so many failures in planters. And that's why today people are apprehensive about vegetative roofing. They said, oh my God, how is that thing is going to work? Well, back then, people made a mistake, because you waterproof a planter, you put your protection layer on the top, you put topsoil or engineered growth media, whatever you want to call it, and then you take a tree, you don't pay attention to the size of the roots, you put that tree in there, and you give it water, okay? So what happened is water, because the gravity continued to seep down to the lowest area. What is the lowest area in this planter? Is the waterproofing layer, okay? Now, nature is unique. Plants and trees and shrubs are trained to always go after moisture. So the root system will go to where the moisture is accumulating. You follow? So the growth was redirected to the waterproofing layer, and that's what many of the problem occurred. Versus today, when you are incorporating a moisture retention layer, and that moisture retention layer, a lot of people make a mistake. They put the waterproofing membrane and put the moisture retention layer right above it. It's not good. You want to elevate that above drainage layer. So you have the membrane and the drainage layer acting as protection, plus it facilitates moisture to be released. And then the moisture retention layer. So the root system will get to that point. It's happy, there's lots of feed there, and it doesn't go. So you want to redirect the growth away from the membrane. That's one thing that's definitely, a no-no type of thing. Tunnels, I used whatever technology. The tunnel system was traditional tunnel. Tunnels are different methods of tunnel application. It was not done by like a pouring machine, but was a conventional, basically like waterproofing, like an underground structure. The site was excavated, and then you apply your waterproofing to that structure. And then you apply your protection layers, and then the drainage. The drainage are very, very important. And you have to think about the drainage also after the fact. Let me know if I'm continuing in too much on one thing.
This is
You want me
true.
to-
We get
Yes.
all the time. We get all the time you'd like to spend. So.
Well, it was this particular, was tunnels and was the waterproofing. I learned one thing in the old days, especially when you work in a climate where you have freezing conditions, ice and snow, and you have parking lots above that underground structure. What happened in the parking lot when you have snow? You have snow plow plowing the snow and pushing it to the side over the grass or over the shrubbery or whatever. Okay, imagine if you take a section all the way across the end of the parking, all the way down to the underground structure. Imagine you run to the vertical wall for the tunnel or for the underground structure. Okay, so what happened is you are actually increasing the level of moisture right at the wall. You imagining this or not?
Right.
And that's a huge problem. So you always need to keep in mind, yes, you waterproof it, you have an effective waterproofing system, but think about the operation after the fact. And then you can incorporate an additional layer of material to basically divert the moisture away after you waterproof it, a layer of material, go into a trench, and that's where you have a secondary drainage pipe going to perhaps a dry well. So those things can help because once you cover a structure, it's so expensive to regain access. And you have one time a chance to do it right. And the one time chance to do it right is not just the best material for the soil, the best product that can overcome physical abuse during an installation. Think about after the fact, how is this whole thing will function, and design for that.
I like this idea that you've hit on, I think, a couple times here, that you look at how a system is going to actually be used and actually perform in the real world, and take into consideration like the natural tendency and momentum of things and try to work with that rather than
Yeah.
against it, rather than fight it. Like, for example, you identify that the tree roots or the plant roots will seek the water. So rather than argue with nature, you decide like, okay, well, we'll just move the water a little bit.
And nature always wins.
Exactly.
Yes, it does.
Nature always wins.
Yes.
I mean, it's, I have a home in Florida, off the record, I guess. And I'm sitting flipping out, not sure where is the hurricane is going to hit,
Mm.
And that would be the second hurricane for me, because
Mm.
3 days before I retired in 2022, Hurricane Ann hit
Mm-hmm.
and hit. I was 12 miles away from my home.
Oh my gosh.
And nature won. I had to spend quite a bit of my time. I had all these plans to travel, so I was basically managing the repairs. So keeping hands crossed. But yeah, don't fight Mother Nature.
Yeah, I find that that concept comes up a lot, where people will hand wave and have high expectations and hopes when experience probably shows otherwise. So it
Well, very simple thing that I can't believe I still see it. When you have water draining on a roof, and all of a sudden it's running across an expansion joint. Are you kidding me? This is absolutely no. It's like, oh, for cost we have to do this and that. No, it is a problem. It's eventually going to have a problem, a big problem, matter of fact.
Right.
Yeah?
Right. So I want to circle back quickly to this this childhood in Alexandria. I'm kind of intrigued by this. I'm imagining 6-year-old Samir going to the job sites with your grandfather, and that obviously has had an impact on your career and choices and ideas about how to spend your career. So I'm wondering, were there any particular experiences that stick out from that time that still are in your mind and you feel like may have been formative in later on in your career, getting into this place of interest in sustainability and durability of these systems?
Well, several things. One thing I always remember, and with the internet today and Facebook, people would post pictures, and I came across the building. And I said to my wife, I said, "My God!" I said, "This is the building I went to with my grandfather when that building was being constructed."
Well,
And I used to go on the 11th floor. Why? Because they had like a nightclub. It was multi-use building, and they had a restaurant and they had the dancing area. And as a kid, they had this parquet floor, I guess, for the dance, and I was just skidding over the floor. I still remember that, and yeah, that's one thing I always remember. But well, my grandfather was he really was all about do it well and do it once. You don't have to keep going back. And he really had a very good name and good reputation. And he actually, I used to sit with him in some of the meetings because he did business with people that knew him and knew him very well.
Mm-hmm.
And they trusted him. They always came in to get his opinion. And sometimes they came to him to get his opinion about a project that he's not even involved. They tell him about the problem, and what they are being told, and they want to see if he thinks it's a valid thing or not, and he will give them an advice. And I always remember that. I always looked up to him. And that really influenced me a great deal, because till now, I mean, I have developed, as you know, when you spend those many years working, I call them friends now, because you've been dealing with them for so long. I still have architects will call me and says, sorry to disturb your retirement. You have a minute. And I have more than a minute for them. And I enjoy it. I don't expect anything in return. But I become intrigued with the fact I want to help, number one. Number two, They call on me because there is a gray area. There is a problem. And I want to dive into that problem because to me, it's very, very intriguing, when you get into that. And that's what I did as part of my job. Being a design service, I also get involved in forensic assessment and evaluation, what caused the problem, what caused the failure in this particular project. Is it really a blow off because the wind speed was very high and assembly just was not installed accordingly, or something else caused it, like condensation or moisture that infiltrated, weakened insulation fascia, or caused other issues, and low wind speed came across and caused the material to become loose. You can quickly analyze it and say, well, it's a application problem, remove and replace. But it's very costly, and you run the risk of having the same problem again if you did not identify the cause and not being so focused on the symptoms. So it is interesting. Yeah.
Were there any common threads that you came across in that work, analyzing failures, that you saw repeatedly over and over again?
Yeah, and I've been seeing it now because, I have a small consulting business. I don't do any marketing, to be honest with you, except the people I know, they call me. And the one thing I see is moisture accumulation, and I see it in a couple of things. I see it quite a bit with reflective membranes in cold climate region where no vapor barrier. In the U.S. market, traditionally, vapor barriers were not used. And so you have, when you heat a building, hot air rises. Hot air has high level of moisture or relative humidity. The minute it infiltrates through the deck to the roofing assembly, once it hits a surface below the dew point, it condenses and it becomes wet. As the case with the white membrane, it freezes. And in the winter, when you walk, you can actually feel the ice breaking under your feet. Comes the summer, you get a call, my roof is leaking, but it's bright sun, shine outside. And it's leaking in different locations. This is condensation that developed and moisture accumulated during the winter time. Now it's coming down. So I've seen that repeatedly. Have I seen it with black membrane? Yes, but not to the extent. I've seen it on a black membrane in extreme case condition situations, where, for example, a building was being renovated. 3 floors were being renovated, top 3 floors, after they put the roof on, and that construction moisture and space heater and all that moisture was being driven upward, and I seen that moisture collected. So this is one. The other one I see several of it is wood deck construction, which is more, you see it more in California, where you have a low slope roof, say plywood or OSB decking, the wood rafters, and they have the insulation from under the plywood deck. It could be fiberglass insulation, it could be something else, And the membrane installed over a thermal barrier directly on a plywood. And that membrane could be adhered or could be mechanically fastened. I've seen a lot of problem with this. Now, keep in mind, in the ceiling, they put the insulation, and then they put a polyethylene film like sheet and a drywall and whatever. But it's always damaged. That plastic sheet they put in there, it's not there, or half of it there. It is poorly installed, the vapor barrier, it does not function. And you see that in residential, you see it sometimes in nursing homes and things of that nature, where you have relative humidity, 40% and sometimes higher. And the moisture, again, the warm air leak through and condenses on the underside of the plywood and some go through the joints in the plywood, and you end with mold and deterioration in the plywood. And I always say just to reverse it, put the insulation, everything on the top. That's your best bet.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
if there is a challenge, there is another remedy, but sometimes there are consequences.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of
Let me
a
tell
works
you.
everywhere
Yeah.
solution.
Yeah.
Samir, I want to circle back to something that you said sort of at the beginning of that, how you're doing a smaller consulting business right now, and a lot of the people that will call you are friends that you've made over the years because they know that you're a trusted source of information. And something I think that's so unique to our industry is the people. They keep coming back, and the connections in our industry, I think, are something that's so unique to our industry. So do you want to talk about how you've seen the industry evolve in that way over the years?
Yeah, that's what I loved about this, about the industry. When I came to the US, people don't understand how simple American are. They think people are, no offense, they think people are so sophisticated, don't have time to say hi or how are you. They're not very social and so forth. And when I have relatives come to visit, they go back with a whole different picture. And what I love about our industry, what you see is what you get in 90% of the cases. Really, people are straightforward. And it is the industry where you can pick up the phone and you call another consultant, somebody you look up to, or somebody you think you may have this situation. Or somebody will give you the name and said, call him. I think he ran through the same problem. And that's very, very common. And I really like that, and I honor that tremendously. And that's why I became really fascinated with, back then was RCI, and now is IBEC, because networking is huge. People know each other. They call in each other. I get calls. I answer calls. If I feel like there is something I want to take a second opinion, I will call somebody and ask. You
have somebody to call through those
Yeah.
experiences that you've had with them.
Yeah. So this is really unique, and I enjoy that. I mean, it's an industry that I don't know. It's an addictive industry in it. It's unique. Joined back in 1980. And many of the standards were not there. Many standards yet needed to be refined and needed to be developed and improved. So you really needed each other. You needed to talk to other people and work with other people. And that's really great. And now the competition, as for the industry competition, as for the different companies, it's quite unique, really. They all up their games, and they all working on innovations and trying to do better, and that's helping to advance the industry. So they can work on their side of the business, developing material and accessories. And for us in the design, we need also to up our game and recognize some of the problems out there. Unfortunately, we get a little bit intimidated when they come to you and says, you designing a building in the city of Chicago, and you are not to put anything but highly reflective membrane. Okay, but can I design to, because you can design it to prevent the accumulation of moisture. It come at a price, But
the roof
unfortunately,
color issue is.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, sorry to jump in, but the roof color issue is interesting to me because when I was getting ready for our discussion, I found a paper that you wrote back in 2009 on the topic. So, going on 15 years ago now. And I remember, for around that time, it was a major topic of discussion. And I'm wondering your thoughts on how or if the industry has evolved in the intervening 15 years on this topic, and have some of the arguments that you were making entered into the conventional wisdom yet.
I don't know which paper is that.
It was public. It was from one of the RCI, symposiums.
Okay, maybe where does the heat go? I had
something like this.
I actually put one in Huffington Post as well. Well,
Yes, similar topic.
when I retired, and when I hear about the problem, I wanted to get a full page in a newspaper. It was my picture and the word "I told you so," and a picture of a roof, black and white. And then I realized it cost a lot of money. I said, "Yeah, it's not worth it." Um, I, I got accused of many things. I got accused of I work for a company. Even so, we at the time, well, still actually, we make white reflective membrane and black dark roofs. And at the time, we're actually number one producer of reflective membranes. More than anybody else. And the number two producer come at a distant second. Um, and throughout my talk, I had two issues, or maybe three. One, don't oversell energy saving regardless of location. It's false statement and it's misleading. That was number one. Number two, do not mandate. Let that be the choice of the designer. He will assess the building condition. He will design accordingly, because when you mandate, people think it is as simple as changing from black shirt to a white shirt. You don't have to do anything. Now, the thermodynamic is different. Things will be totally and absolutely different. And what was the third one? There was the third one. Third one was really important. But then they basically they said, I'm not being honest. I'm trying to help it to sell the black material because probably the company makes more money selling the black membrane and all kind of whatever. Of course, those who were saying that were only making white material, and I, it was unfortunate because my biggest issue is the condensation that everybody was in denial. Um, and they get different people uh, with high level of education, scientists, to telling you, oh, no, this is not correct. The color of the roof has no impact on condensation. And they are right, the color, okay? But that's plain with word. The color does not. But we're talking about membrane that can gain, because of solar, can become much higher at higher temperature versus a highly reflective cool membrane. Cool membrane becomes much colder, falls frequency below the dew point. And that's where condensation happens. So when you have side-by-side black membrane and a white membrane, and you do not design to prevent that warm air migration, in both cases, it will contact the material from the underside. But because the black is not below the dew point yet, no condensation is developing, but condensation was developing for longer period of time with the white membrane. And then it freezes, and then drying cycle. We talked about all that, and then I finally said, just give it up. I get calls now. I honestly get calls now, and I tell people what to do without even going up on the roof. So I'm a big promoter of air barriers. Okay, I know we use the term vapor barrier in our industry, but when you take a vapor barrier, make sure it's continuously sealed. I want to create a barrier to prevent warm air migration. I want to stop it before it gets the coldest spot. I really think that will solve so many issues, because as designers, we always, when we approach it sustainability or durability, we went at it from the top down. Thicker membrane underlayment, so I have higher or greater wind uplift. Beef up the fastening. Use a storm strip. Everything from the top. But then you have this humid air coming and causing erosion and weakening the assembly from down below. And everybody says, what went wrong,
Yes.
So
Have you found that, it sounds like probably maybe the answer is no, but have you found that people have come to understand that in more nuanced way as you describe since more recently, or is there still a lot of confusion?
I think they understand it. Unfortunately, when people have problems, they when I say people, you can say manufacturer. Nobody want to talk about their issue because they may reduce confidence level, But there have been issues with condensation throughout the industry,
Absolutely.
and people it fluctuates. It fluctuates when you have a building in colder climate with a single layer insulation, which is a disaster. And the guy said, well, it was a warehouse. I didn't really, have to design for energy, this and that, but massive amount of condensation. You go to another building in a moderate climate with 2 layers of insulation with stagger joint. That will be less. Then you go to the perfect situation with an air barrier / vapor barrier, 2 layers of insulation, and then your assembly, and that's good. Yeah.
It seems like this idea of the industry misunderstanding, you mentioned how people call a material a vapor barrier a lot of the time, when in reality, the more important feature is that it's an air barrier. And I think that fundamental misconception in the industry has caused a lot of problems, not just in roofing, but in wall assemblies and other areas too, where the problem all along was air leakage and people mistook it for something else.
Air leakage is far devastating than just diffusion due to pressure. But I think people really understand it. My biggest issue right now is with like city municipality under the banner of climate change and others. They label you if you try to say be cautious about these issues. They look at you like you're not, you don't care about the climate. I had one person one time years ago. There was a pavilion in a trade show for sustainable products, and it was a dark gray roof EBDM. And the question was, what is sustainable about it? It's black. And I said, there is no color to sustainability. If somebody said white is green, it's wrong. It's really, it's all it is. It's a symbolic thing. You have to design the assembly, So, hopefully things are, catching up, because I don't think whether it is a manufacturer or a designer, they're trying to purposely put substandard assembly, So, I'm hoping the market is far more educated now. Like you said, was that 2009? Can't believe that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Been quite some time. So how it's pretty clear to me from looking at your background and history of publications and talks and things like that, that you care deeply about sustainability in a broad sense. How would you describe sustainability? What does it mean to you?
Well, sustainability to me, and when you talk roofing, it is, and I'm going to just take a step forward, durability and sustainability. Durability was never part of the tenet of sustainability. It was not one of the tenets. However, it was asserted in our industry. Durability is part of sustainability. Why is that? Because if I increase durability, I have roofs that going to last, instead of 10 years, will last to 20 to 30 years. Because the roof is going to last 20 to 30 years, I want to make sure I have my energy package, which is the insulation and so forth, delivering performance, not just for this year, but for years to come. Because as you know, the minimum R value standard keep changing So I want to meet those standards, so I'm reducing energy consumption. I am reducing CO2 emission. Um, I am diverting material from going to landfill by making, the roof last longer.
Yes.
And in the meantime, of course, I want to make sure I have methods and material that is not harmful to the environment during installation. And when I say methods, because when you work, especially in a consulting business, you work more on re-roofing projects, and system you are installing. Think about, is it how intrusive it is? I want to make sure it's very accommodating to the building operation and will not disrupt the daily operation in the building, or if there's disruption, is minimized, from minimizing waste at the job site, reducing odor, noise level, debris in the building, and so forth. So to me, sustainability is all about uh, 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 protecting natural resources throughout. When I design, it's in the design, application, restoration, and possible demolition of that particular roof system. So it goes. But to me, it's all about the biggest one. The biggest thing is about extending the life of that roof system. I'm not going to get excited and say, guess what? I have a highly reflective membrane that is going to save me energy because that building is located in Atlanta, Georgia, and it's going to deliver. But you put a system that is substandard. You did not compensate. You did not stagger insulation joints, so you're losing through the joint. You're losing because of thermal bridging due to fasteners. The membrane is 1 millimeter or 45 mil. Its life expectancy is not going to be there. You have movement in the sheet and fluttering that's trying to suck the building. Not suck the building, suck air up into the roof system. You did not incorporate air barrier. No, so you did not.
Yes.
That's my biggest point. Do not get excited about the color. That's unfortunately, I don't know if you have a salesman knock on your door or whatever, is going to give you a sustainable green roof. You said green. Well, it's highly reflective white. There's a lot more than that, I'm not against, when people talk, I'm not against highly reflective. And I think color, it depends. I will not use highly reflective in a city environment where I have lots of neighboring buildings and I'm deflecting sunlight and energy into somebody's curtain wall or glass windows. That's can be a big issue. I like to be selective when I'm doing a multi-level roof to decide what I want to do as for the color of the roof. I may decide to use vegetated roof in certain roof level. I may decide to use ballasted roof. Ballasted roof, people not receptive to ballasted systems today, but ballasted roofs were one of the most, to me, it's one of the most sustainable type, can be one of the most sustainable roofs. Unfortunately, they were promoted as the most economical roof, so they used the thinnest membrane over loose lay insulation, sometimes over half-inch low density EPS insulation, covering an old roof, and then they put stone on the top. And of course the old technology was seams and flashing. But today you have better quality seams, better quality flashing. You use a thicker membrane. You specify proper insulation thickness, and you have the stone on the top. Would be a perfect. Now the stone. I did a ballasted roof in Arizona, and somebody said, "Are you nuts?" I said, no, it's a ballasted roof. It's the ballast. Ballast have it deflects some of the heat, obviously, but it has a low emissivity. Of course, it was a high albedo roof. They want high reflectivity, high reflectivity, less retention. Ballast will deflect some sunlight, but has lower emissivity. Lower emissivity was good in Arizona because during the day when it's extremely hot, I have some level of protection on the membrane, deflecting some of that heat. At nighttime, when the temperature drop about 35 to 40 some degree, I have that warmer blanket on the top of the membrane, slowly radiating the heat. It works perfectly. We've done them in the Gulf region in the Middle East, whether it is ballast or paver or inverted assembly, as you know. So there are many ways to approach a sustainable design and to practice sustainability when designing roof system, not just by managing the roof color, but by the entire assembly itself.
Well, I think that nuanced approach that you just described is a wonderful way to approach the idea of sustainability, and makes a whole lot of sense to me, certainly. And it strikes me that is one of the ways that folks like you can be contributing to the industry by sharing those kind of thoughtful approaches to these problems. And that brings me to the organization that you're currently working with, the International Institute of Enclosure Consultants, IIBEC, and seems like an area where an organization like that could play a big role.
Yeah, they do. It's really when consultants are involved, they really work with the design, work with the roof color, depending on the geographic location of a building, and they advise building owner accordingly. So they do that as part of their practices, but they also have lots of educational programs. They don't go, and I certainly understand, they say, oh, we're against white membrane, because nobody's against white membrane. I'm not against white membrane.
No, clearly not.
But I'm not against it, but what I'm saying is the design is very important. And the way you design a roof with a darker color membrane will not necessarily be the same way, because now we're dealing with a more sensitive type application due to the dew point variation. So that's my opinion. But with IIBEC, like I said, how their member practice, but they also have educational programs to educate the public. They have the online type training available. Yes. They have publication like the Interface, which is monthly magazine, and they also have the technical hub where people can access to basically review articles and decide for themselves, what needs to be done. And that's my main attraction. Is I find sometimes that an architect need to be advised accordingly, and if an owner insists on having a certain colored roof, you need to tell him there will be some modification to the design, due to the following. We talked about what it is. And I wish also many architects go through a peer review process. Mm-hmm. When you have professional roofing consultants, that's what they do day in and day out, every single day, and they have seen all kind of issues. Right. I think they can offer a great insight, And
it's interesting that it's pretty typical for a. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, in our industry is anytime you can share your experience. You share a case study. People are so receptive to hear it. In a short period of time, you can learn about the situation and you can avoid going through it. You learn it from somebody's mistake. It's the best Absolutely. Thing, not your own.
Absolutely. One of my favorite things about IBEC that this, in my experience has been the involvement of people from different parts of the industry. So including manufacturers as well as consultants, as well as even on the contractor side, and getting those different viewpoints. And everyone is typically very collegial and willing to contribute, as you said, and share what they've learned. And that kind of atmosphere, I think, has been really energizing. Anytime I go to one of the IBEC events, I find that collegial atmosphere to be very energizing and helpful.
Yeah, I said that to many of the perhaps the officers. When I was in the manufacturing side, I actually had to work closely with RCI back then, and IBEC toward the end. And I told them, I said, one of the major attraction is networking, and the second is education. I said, you guys absolutely on the right track, and that organization came long way, and they delivering unique service to the industry. And I like the fact that now they not, when they started, as you know, they were more focused on roofing,
Right.
Mostly re-roofing application, and now diversified into exterior walls and total building envelope and
Yes.
waterproofing. So that's really unique, because that's what we need out there. You go to school to study architecture or architecture engineering. I mean, how much they really teach about moisture barriers and how you maintain the building watertight. And, yes, we study some building science and things of that nature, but not that much,
Yeah.
So,
You're right. In the typical education program, higher education program for, say, civil engineers or architects or folks that often end up somewhere in our industry, those practical applied principles, building science, even building science at a more fundamental level is not often taught very much, but certainly things like roofing and waterproofing principles and exterior wall assemblies from a technical standpoint, I think they don't have a big role in the typical education program. And I wanted to ask you, actually, I think, I want to be mindful of everybody's time, and this has been a really amazing discussion. And I had a question kind of lined up that fits really well here, I think. And that is, if you had, with your lifetime of experience now in this industry, if you had the opportunity to give like a commencement address to every graduate who was entering let's call it the building enclosure industry, but roofing, waterproofing exterior walls, whether they're going to work for a contractor or they're going to work for a manufacturer or an engineering firm or something like that. Imagine you had all those people together and you were giving the commencement address. What would be your main message to these students entering the industry now for the first time?
Well, there are several messages. I never put it in a like a nice phrase, but I always believed that it's not what you do, but how well you do it. Because I see young people, they want to join, and I've noticed that toward the end, on my industry side, and the industry, young people want the big title and want the big money, and they do one thing and they think they really got involved. And my thing would be, get involved, be true to yourself. It's not what you do, but how well you do it. The title is not going to honor you. You honor the title, and when you start a career, you are in a perfect position to learn, and you are in a perfect position to ask many, many questions. If you don't, it's going to be too late. And you're going to be embarrassed to ask a question a year later or 2 years later, because I've seen it happen. Yes. And you try to hide your weakness. So don't be afraid. When you are in the beginning, you ask, and many people will be eager to share their knowledge with you.
Yes.
So that's will can basically summit. It's just, people just be true and don't be afraid. Don't be intimidated. And when you're young, that's your opportunity today. Well, I don't have much experience. Just dive in and
Yes.
and you're going to learn. One of the things that helped me a great deal when I joined Carlisle was a small company. That Syntec did not exist. It was tire and rubber company, and there was a small division called Construction Materials. And so they took a group of us and we started Carlisle Syntec. So as we were doing roofing project, but whatever an opportunity came, we wanted to take it. And I was the guy to handle those opportunities. How you were going about it, I had a boss who was great. The guy who hired me is the one who pioneered the single ply. He said, he called me Shamir. He said, give it to Shamir. He'll figure it out. Just give it to him. He didn't even want to deal with it. So from early on, I got involved in many, many different things. And that's how you do it. That's how you do it. Don't sit back and be afraid to participate.
I think that's a wonderful message.
Yeah, I think you've lived that so well, Samir, and it's such proof that you're spending your retirement still solving industry problems and teaching others and staying connected.
Well, in the beginning, I told you it's like my job became my hobby, and that's another thing I told people. I said you have to be passionate about something. Look how people go nuts watching a football game or whatever. I said if you really like your job, you gotta like your job. If you really like it, you're going to excel because you want to really know so much about it. And that's what happened. I married my job for a long time. And sometimes you look back and say, what did I do? And you reach a point where you see, like, they say deja vu, you see the same thing happening. Like some of the things that you feel it's gone, no longer, people are going to be inquiring about, all of a sudden it's coming back. But it's part of life, And always leave your fingerprint. We come through life, you have to have an impact, or you have to impact the life. Don't come and go and your presence was not felt. So, leave your fingerprints and everything. I had my fingerprints and everything in Carlisle. I've done so many different things. So, and I'm content. I'm content.
Well, Samir, this has been a really terrific conversation.
Yeah, I enjoyed talking to you.
I really enjoyed it for sure.
Thank you. Are you
for taking the time.
To Pittsburgh or?
We're in Hudson. I'm in Hudson, Massachusetts, and Chelsea is near Cleveland, Ohio. So we've got kind of either side of Pittsburgh, I guess.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, the industry has taken my family all over, Samir. So we've moved around a little bit since I've last seen you.
So you are in Ohio now, right? Yeah.
Yes.
I thought you were in Western Pennsylvania for a while.
We were for a number of years.
Yeah, I still in Carlisle. That's my main because family. And I have the home in Cape Coral, Florida, in the Gulf of Mexico there. And occasionally I go back and forth. And sometimes I do some work there. But it's, I enjoy working. I don't want to just wake up someday and says, well, I don't know what to do. Maybe I'll cut the grass.
I don't think you're at any risk of not having anything to do, Samir.
It doesn't seem like it.
Yeah, I enjoy that.
Well, thank you very much. I'm super happy to make the,
thank you, man.
The introduction to you, and I'm happy to know you.
Oh, thank you. Same here, and stay in touch.
Absolutely.
I enjoyed it too. Anytime we get to talk roofing, and those type of things. I really enjoy it.
Absolutely.
Let's do it again then.
You got it. We'll do a round two sometime. All right.
Thanks,
All right.
Samir. Thanks, Matt.
Take care,
Okay,
Samir. Thanks. Bye. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. Bye.